Okay, so welcome to the show. My name is Richard Windman. This is the interviews with Richard Windman. Today I'm interviewing Sedrick Gilbert at my house. Sedrick is a victim, now a survivor. He's also an activist and an advocate for childhood sex abuse. And so, welcome to my home.
Thank you for having me.
So, Sedrick, a lot of people might not know who you are. Can you tell us a little bit about who you are and where you're from up to the point of abuse?
My name is Sedrick Gilbert, born and raised in Bryan, College Station, Texas. Started off in College Station living with my mother, my father, my sister at first, then later on came my younger brother. Stayed in the neighborhood surrounded by extended family and friends. Had what I thought was an ideal childhood. However, I was a happy child
Mm-hmm.
with always wanting to learn, to know. It was an idealistic childhood, which on the surface I thought was perfect. However, I came from a family where struggles, problems, they weren't discussed.
Mm-hmm.
Growing up, seeing life on television, I tried to adapt that to my own life with a perfect dad, perfect mother. My sister, she's 4 years older than me. And for the majority of my childhood, I felt like she hated me and I couldn't figure out why.
Mm-hmm.
I had friends in my neighborhood. There was a strict rule that no one was allowed in our house. So there were different aspects of life where when I was playing with my friends, it was one side. When I went to school, it was another side. And when I got home, yet another side. I didn't realize, but that balancing act that I had to do was a lot for a kid. So everything was interrupted one night with my half brother.
So at this point, how old are you?
That had to be around 5 or 6 years old.
5 or 6 years old, and he's your half brother.
Half brother.
Okay.
Share the same father.
Mm.
He was a product of a one-night stand that my dad had.
Mm-hmm.
That was before he met my mother.
Right. Okay.
He would come over on every other weekend, and I was excited for him to come because with my sister, she wouldn't play with me. She acted like she didn't want me to be around. My friends, that was only during the day. So I didn't really have anyone else, and I had Hot Wheels and Matchbox cars and different He-Man figures and stuff like that. When he would come, he would play with me.
Mm-hmm.
So it was one night because we shared the same bed. And we had been playing and got into bed to go to sleep. And he tickled me. And I snapped a band of his underwear. and he snapped mine back and kept doing that. And, I thought it was just a game.
Mm.
The next time he came over, he initiated the snapping of the bands again. But then his hand went inside my underwear. And I was like, this is taking the game farther than, but I didn't just, I had suppressed that memory. And it only came back to me in the last few years. The memory had been suppressed after he told me once the molestation escalated that it was my fault because I turned him on.
We hear that a lot, don't we? It's the victim's fault. Okay.
So it became where he wasn't going to play with me with my toys if I didn't let him play with my body.
Mm. How much older is he than you?
5 years.
5 years older than you. Okay. So he was clearly in a position of sort of authority and was the big brother. And
So I would ask him to stop, but he said it was just a game. We had gone to a supermarket one night with my dad, and we were on the back of his pickup truck. My dad went inside the store, and my brother, he came over to my side of the truck, and he said, "Hold my hand." And by this time, I had just become disgusted with him. And I told him no. And he said, "Hold my hand." And he grabbed me, and I pushed him. He fell onto the concrete. And when he got back up, he had scratches on him and a cut. And he said that if I told anyone what he had been doing to me, he would tell him I tried to kill him.
we hear that a lot too.
That terrified me.
Yeah.
So the abuse went on. When my family, we moved into another house a few blocks away from where we had been staying. And I don't remember him ever coming over there when we stayed. So the abuse had stopped for a time. Ended up going to stay with my aunt in Dallas for a week in the summertime, summer of 1987. And I was excited to go because she was taking me around to see the buildings and everything, big city life. But I had to spend that weekend with him there too, that week.
Yeah.
And she would go to work during the day. Each and every day, he would chase me all around the apartment. And I begged and I pleaded for him not to. I told him, "I love you. Please don't do this to me." And he said he couldn't help himself because I turned him on.
Turned you on. Turned him on. That's Mm.
I didn't feel like I could tell anyone because he was holding this over my head that I tried to kill him. I didn't know how to tell. My dad passed away. And I enjoyed going to my grandparents' house. Unfortunately, he moved in with my grandparents. The abuse started again. And I would know that he was coming home. And I would try and stay awake. Because I knew that when I would fall asleep, that's when he would do it. I began to not like going to sleep, even when I was at home, because I knew if I fell asleep, something bad would happen.
Yeah.
I tried a few times. I put a pair of scissors under my pillow, fell asleep. He found the scissors and moved them. I tried to put a knife. He found the knife. And he was sent to pick my little brother and me up to take to our grandparents' house, and I would dread it. There were signs that went out that people didn't pick up on because I was standoffish towards them. It was clear that I didn't want to be around them.
How were your grades affected during this? I mean, so in the case of my abuse, when I started being abused, I went from a straight A student to a nosedive immediately overnight Fs.
Well, see, that's part of that, what I was talking about with taking different parts of myself to the different parts of my life. I was always an excellent student in school. I knew school offered me a refuge. I was learning and growing, excelling. However, there was always a maturity towards me that I had. And adults, they say that like it was a compliment. You're so mature for your own age.
Mm-hmm.
No one ever bothered to figure out why.
Because you've been surviving all of your life. You had to grow up really, really, really fast. That's why.
So one weekend at my grandparents', I was really, the feelings of shame. And how could I have allowed this to happen and to go on for so long? And it wouldn't stop. So before he got home, I left and started walking the streets. Police officers, they came across me and ended up taking me back to my grandparents' house. My mother and my stepfather, they were called, and I went home. And
Is that when your mother found out about your abuse?
yeah,
And what age were you at that point?
I was in the 7th grade.
7th grade.
And that's when they finally stopped. The physical aspect stopped. But the emotional trauma, it not only didn't stop, it got worse. Because my mother and my stepfather, they went back to my grandparents after I revealed to talk to them. And when they came back home, my stepfather said they talked about it with my grandparents and they come to the agreement that because he was my half brother
Mhm.
and it was something in the family, the police weren't going to be contacted.
Yeah, how about that, huh? In hindsight, what do you think would have been different if they would have contacted the police?
You know what, Richard?
Mm.
I've never, never thought, never wondered, because that's just what set into me was to go on with life. And you asked me that, and I don't even have an answer for you now.
It's okay. No, no answer necessary.
But the trauma got worse because I saw my family members still interacting with him
Mm-hmm.
as if nothing had happened. And it made me wonder, do they not care about me?
Yeah.
And that would trigger me.
Yeah.
I only found out years later, no one else in the family had ever been told.
Wow. So tell us about the culture of secrecy in families when childhood sex abuse happens in a family setting.
It can feel like the perpetrator is more protected than the victim.
Mm-hmm.
With the secrecy, it puts an onus of embarrassment and shame on the victim. When you're not heard, you're not seen. With me, it was like I was left to my own devices.
Same here.
And I've said this often now, that if it makes someone uncomfortable to hear and to talk about childhood sexual abuse, imagine how the victim and survivor felt enduring it.
Yeah.
It felt to me like there was I know it was something huge,
Mm-hmm.
hard to comprehend, but for a child to suffer that, one needs to move past the uncomfortability. Children are owed protection first and foremost.
Sure.
And once you know that something has happened to them, they need support and protection even more.
Mm-hmm. But that's not what you got, was it?
No.
Yeah, the the largest demographic of childhood sex abuse is not the church, not the Boy Scouts, not the Mormon church, whoever. It's childhood sex abuse in the home. It's the most underreported demographic and the largest one as well. And I can tell you just a little bit about my story is that um when I was a child, my parents freaked out when they found out I got abused. My dad stopped coming around, never looked me in the eye again. My mom went into a deep, deep depression. But as I got older and I started to face my abuse, um, I started to face my abuse. I told my wife that I was going to go public, just tell my story. And she was like, a lot like your mom and like Alice's mom. No, you're not bringing that shame on our family. You're not going to say a damn thing. And that was probably more hurtful than some of the acts themselves. I don't think that people truly understand how we get triggered after the abuse. Like when you cover up the abuse, that's a trigger. When you're a parent, you don't look at your kid in the face anymore. That's a trigger. It's a whole life of misery. Is what it
Since
is.
so much was kept secret,
Mhm.
I would have family members to ask, well, why don't you talk to your brother? Why?
Mhm.
A trigger.
Yeah.
Hearing his name was a trigger
Hmm.
because what goes unhealed continues to traumatize.
Hmm.
A lot of people just see me in my everyday life because I became good at not masking, but not dealing with, because I didn't have the tools to. So I just went through life. On the surface, people say, Cedrick, you're one of the strongest people we know. I was always expected to be strong, to be okay. And having this inside of me that had never come out, feeling like there was no one who could relate, no one who I could talk to about it. Because it had been ingrained in me that even though that was just the total opposite of who I was growing up to be, to express myself,
Hmm.
but I didn't know how to express that. So it led to a lot of uncertainty and confusion, even though you see this kid who seems to have everything together, who is a natural born leader, who has this voice that's developing that he uses. I had a voice for others. I had a voice for my ambitions, but not a voice for that inner child.
Hmm. Yep. Yeah, the voice is everything. When we find our voices again, like a really big milestone in healing. When you find your voice again, and you start using it.
Well, I began with, and my healing really didn't occur until my late 30s.
Mhm. Which is statistically earlier. Most people that come out in their late 40s or early 50s, but
Well, as I've been told, I'm more mature for my age,
yeah.
and I had seen a lot. One counselor came to me in the 8th grade, and she said, "Cedrick, you need to watch yourself because it seems like a lot of things you're saying and you're doing are over sexualized."
Mm.
I was the editor of the school newspaper and had a humor column with a pen name, and it was discussions about Whitney Houston and Bobby Brown when they were together and him cheating on her. And Whitney Houston said, "Well, that's all right because I know what he comes home every night." And in the column it said, "Yeah, Whitney, he may come home every night, but how many stops does he make in between them?"
Did you know this about Bobby Brown, that he's a
Yes,
survivor as well?
yes, yeah.
Yeah.
So the counselor tells me that. And also, and that it would probably be a long time before I found a real girlfriend because I was so much more mature than the girls my age. She said, but I didn't have to worry because later on, girls would see that I would make money, so they want to be with me.
Mm-hmm.
So, and just in retrospect, recently, I thought about this as far as that counselor was concerned. If you saw that an 8th grade boy was over sexualized and more mature for his age, shouldn't you be able to put those dots together, those clues?
Those are two biggest red flags.
So
It's like when you hear your kids say a curse word for the first time. Where did you hear that from? Right. And so when you had this sexualized behavior, where did you learn that from? So I would automatically assume that they've been abused or exposed to something like that.
but with me, I just went through life having to find my own way. And especially being a Black kid in the South,
Mhm.
just the way that I speak, I can either be applauded for or criticized. But it didn't matter to me because I had this tough outer shell that was built up because of the abuse, to where I was going to be who I was, and I didn't need anybody's approval for it.
Mhm.
With that hardened shell, it turned off certain emotions. I said I wouldn't allow myself to feel.
Mhm.
Everything was bottled up. And when it would blow up, it was always an ugly scene with me bleeding on people who hadn't cut me.
Mhm. Wow. Waiting on people that haven't cut you.
Forming healthy relationships. Even it took me a long time to find myself able to trust other guys. And then when I would, if you did anything that was a betrayal, I would immediately just cut you off. You didn't get another chance.
Yeah. Trust is huge in our community.
Intimate
Yeah.
intimate issues,
Mhm.
even going to the barber.
The barber.
For years
Mhm.
when it comes to getting shaved. I said no, because my half brother at one time
Oh,
held a knife to my throat,
yeah.
and I would tense up.
Mhm.
I didn't like to be touched, not hugged. And I think we underestimate the power there is in a hug.
Mhm.
But I didn't want to have that.
How does it feel to be able to hug these days?
It's like heaven.
Like heaven. I see you. We go out occasionally, and I see you go into a social situation, and you're just all over everybody. That's a nice thing about you that I like.
Well, I've always been full of love in my heart that I wanted to share with other people. And I found that intimacy in relationships, we tend to only assign that to romance. But when you can find emotional intimacy, even in brotherhood and sisterhood, where you can be vulnerable and trust and confide in someone, where they know and accept all of who you are without having to navigate. I've been blessed with that. And that has played such a big part because the healing, it's a process that we go through.
Absolutely.
I started our.
Let's talk about this. This is a major feature of the vast majority of childhood sex abuse victims and survivors, is that they've either have or have had in the past substance abuse issues, because they medicate the pain because they can't tell anybody. It's a secret. Misplaced shame and guilt. Secret. Can't tell anybody. Drugs, alcohol. Can you tell us, was that your experience? Or
Yes, it was.
you want to talk about that a little bit?
Sure. I was a firm just say no kid. And I believed, because I've been told, if you try drugs the first time, you'll be hooked. Your life will be ruined. And I took that to heart. I didn't even want to sip alcohol. So when I transferred to college at Clark Atlanta University, found a group of friends and they smoked marijuana. I wasn't doing that either. Then they started doing ecstasy. And they were telling me, oh, you got to try this. You got to try this, Sedrick. And you look things up. You're knowledgeable. Go ahead, check it out. It's used for medical purposes. I was like, So I did research and I saw, yeah, it had been, and there were really no side effects to it. But then they told me, I said, well, how much is it that y'all pay? And they said, it can be at $20, $25 a tap. I was like, I work. Y'all don't. No, thank you. So leave it to that crew of friends. They did a GoFundMe before there was GoFundMe.
They did a GoFundMe for drugs?
Amongst themselves to be able to buy.
Oh, I see.
Buy my first one. And I had found a website that you go to with the different pills and would tell you whether they were good or not. So they purchased the first pill for me. And it wasn't any kind of peer pressure. I took that pill and the euphoria was I had always been so buttoned up, so straight-laced, keeping everything under control. I didn't realize at the time how exhausting that was.
What was it that you took the first time?
Ecstasy.
Ecstasy. That's intense.
Well, to me, because I had tried marijuana once before and gotten sick, and I was like, this is not for me.
Yeah.
But with the ecstasy, I said, okay, this is just something when I go out to a club on the weekend. And that's how it was for some time. And my friends, we all agreed that we weren't going to do anything else. We weren't going to do anything hard. But eventually, with one of my close friends, and ironically, she was the first person that I spoke to about my sexual abuse because she had been abused too. We worked together.
Mhm.
We had left work one Friday night. We were going over to my place to get ready to go out. But she said, well, I need to stop someplace. I'll be just a minute.
Mhm.
And she went inside, and Richard, it was a cold night, but she came back out. Oh, it's so cold. My nose is running.
Mhm. Yeah, it's because you have cocaine in your nose.
Uh-huh. But I didn't say anything.
Mm.
About a month later, she said, well, Sedrick, I have something to tell you, and please don't tell anybody else. I said, what is it? And she said, I've done cocaine. And I told her, I said, I know. She said, what? How do you know? I said, okay. I was born, but not yesterday. I'm from Texas,
Mhm.
but not 1800 Texas.
Mhm.
So,
And look in the mirror, your nose is blue.
so I agreed to just keep a secret, and
Mm.
I tried it myself. And I remember when one of our other friends found out that we were doing it, he was devastated. Was he said we had all agreed that we weren't going to do that.
Mhm.
And we're like, it's no big deal.
Mm.
Eventually, all those parameters that I put up, only do things on the weekend, never smoke anything, they came crashing down.
Yeah, they did. Mm.
I was locked in addiction for almost 12 years.
Mm.
The cocaine use escalated.
What was your in that 12-year period? What was your preferred drug or drug of choice?
Ended up being crystal meth.
Crystal meth. That ended up being crystal meth. Wow.
And I did the ecstasy, inhalants,
Mhm.
ketamine, the cocaine, crank, and then the crystal.
Which one was the most devastating, do you think, to you physically?
The cocaine.
The cocaine. Wow.
I use more meth, but the cocaine was the closest to full-blown addiction. With the meth, it became more of the self-medicating.
Tell me about the moment that you got sober. You know, that moment of clarity that everybody talks about.
October 11th, 2012. I had been home alone for a week. My mom had gone on vacation. Excuse me. I just happened to see a correspondence online between my half brother and one of my relatives. And I had stopped for a while, but I said, well, just for old time's sake. So I went on a bender. And it was a day that my mom was coming back from a vacation. So I was up and going around that morning. It gotten in my mind that I wanted to get the eggs Benedict from IHOP.
Mhm.
And I had just been using all that week long. I need to wind it down. Well, I tripped and I fell down the steps into my den and couldn't get up off the floor. My mom came home and she found me like that. It wasn't the first time. And I could see the hurt that she was going through. I finally could see what I was doing to myself. And it wasn't just to myself, it was to those around me. My sister had my nephew, just such a bright light, and to see his innocence that was protected. And when I would see him, that would be so much inspiration for me. But my sister wouldn't bring, when they'd come to town, no one would let me know. She had told me later on that I had left one of my jackets at her house, and he found it, and there was a pipe in the pocket, and he thought it was a toy.
Wow.
So I was not, they didn't tell me, but I found out and concluded that, and with good reason, she didn't want me around her son. So I decided right then and there that enough was enough. I quit that day. I had asked previously, I said, because I just wanted the pain to stop.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like there was anything to go on with living. I needed rest. And I had asked to go to a rehab facility. And it was put upon, well, go ahead and find someplace. And I attempted to, and I wanted to do inpatient because I was just so tired. Once again, I was like, do it yourself, find a place yourself. And I was in crisis. But when I said enough was enough, that I didn't go to rehab, didn't have any withdrawals whatsoever,
You just made a decision.
and have not once since that day thought about using again.
Good.
So,
But you know, that road wasn't without bumps. And so, you know, when we get addicted to substances, you know, eventually it doesn't work anymore. And when it stops working, victims and survivors have many times committed suicide. Did you ever have any struggles with suicide?
yes, I was actually in the midst of my using. I felt like a failure. I was back home in Bryan. I hadn't completed my degree in college. The plans that I had for myself only extended to age 21. Just was completely lost. And now addicted, who Sedrick Gilbert had always been a leader, someone with self-confidence, assured of where he was going in life. He didn't exist anymore. I had been arrested, busted. So as part of the probation, I was sent to MHMR for a program that they had. I was diagnosed there preliminarily as
Mhm.
being bipolar. And they placed me on just a buttload of meds.
Mhm.
I looked at one box that they gave me, and I took one of the pills before I saw what it was, and it was lithium.
Mhm.
Well, later found out the bipolar diagnosis was wrong, but they gave me a lot of antidepressants.
Mhm.
So one day it just got to a point to where I was in so much anguish and so much pain, and it felt like it just wouldn't stop.
Mhm.
So I swallowed a bottle of the antidepressant. My mom found me, and she had me to get up to drink water, to just keep walking around. And that was them,
That was it? Nothing happened?
you know.
I had the same experience. I took a bottle of my mom's Cinequan, which is an antidepressant as well. It's a sedative too. 60 of them I took. And I wound up in the hospital in a coma for 5 days.
Well, when my cousin, he's 10 years older than me, he was always like an older brother. When he found out about the suicide attempt, he raised concern. He was like, is no one going to ask why you did it?
Hmm.
I was just left on my own so much. But eventually, I I was hospitalized several times. And I ended up with pneumococcal pneumonia. And it was the worst pain that I felt physically. By that time, I'd been in car accidents, hit by the car crossing the street, ran into a telephone pole. But what I felt in my chest was excruciating. They kept me in the hospital for a week and released me with all these more meds to take. And I got home and I was just in so much agony that I knew that if I could fall asleep.
Hmm.
So I prayed and I asked the Lord to please let me fall asleep. And when I did, for me not to wake up. And I said, I've already led a very full life. I don't think there's anything more for me to do here. I just want to be free from the pain.
Yeah. Same here. When I woke up from the coma, I was disappointed that I was still here. It was a weird emotion to have.
But what happened was I fell asleep
Yeah.
and I woke back up because I had to pee. And I just looked up and I said, Lord, you know me. You know I'm not about to lay here and pee in my bed. So I dragged myself out of my bed to the bathroom. And that's when I began to realize it was not up to me to decide when my time was up. He still had me here for a reason. I didn't know why. But every day that he woke me up, it gave me the opportunity to work closer to it. And I slowly began to turn my life around.
That's awesome. So let's talk about turning your life around then. Um, you're an activist, you're an advocate, you're a survivor, a warrior for sure. Tell us about what you do these days to, number one, stay healed, and number two, how do you help out doing your advocacy and activist work?
I was paralyzed for over a year and a half. It didn't have anything to do with the addiction. And I was told by doctors I might not ever walk again. This was after I had stopped using. And I told myself in that moment that I didn't know how, but I was going to get out of that wheelchair.
Mhm.
I didn't require any surgery or anything, just went through intense physical therapy and started walking. From there, I found that my spirituality grew.
Mhm.
I ended up running for city council.
Mhm.
Have gotten involved in my community again like I was before. Started speaking out, started telling my story. Because as I learned techniques for healing,
Mhm.
to actually talk about what happened,
Mhm.
all that had been buried and suppressed for so long,
Mhm.
I found my voice to use. I've been using it before for so many things, so many causes for other people, but had never really spoken up for myself. That child, because when you're abused, you're still stuck from when that abuse started,
Mhm.
when your childhood was interrupted.
It's quite an interruption, huh?
And I was waiting for the regular programming to resume,
Mhm.
but had to come to terms with the fact that it never would.
Yeah.
But I've been casting a new production. And I found that in emptying myself, that includes giving all of the hurt and the pain,
Mhm.
giving that to the Lord too, trusting in Him.
Mhm.
And He has filled me with the Holy Spirit that gives a discernment to be an advocate and an activist for others,
Nice.
to be not just a light for them, but to help them find their own light,
Mhm.
which is within all of us. But we have to be seen, we have to be heard, and we have to provide safe places for other people. Everyone in this world is going through something. It may not be sexual abuse, but we all have wounds.
Mhm.
Too many of us are walking wounded,
Mhm.
and we don't know how to heal. We don't know that healing is possible. And I believe one of my callings and reasons for being here on this earth is to show people it is possible to heal from even the most devastating traumas in life.
Yeah. Helen from Colorado has a question. We already covered it early on the show, but maybe she's tuning in late. But her question is, after your parents found out about your abuse, did they support you?
My dad had passed away. He never knew.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to ever tell him because I was afraid of what he might do. My mom, when I sought counseling from the Sexual Assault Resource Center in my community, my therapist, he had told me it was up to me whether I ever wanted to confront my brother. And at first I said no, because I said I didn't want anything to do with him. He was not going to have any power over my life.
Mm-hmm.
But then in working through the counseling, I knew that there was so much anger and hurt inside of me that he had caused. And I wanted to let him know that.
Mm-hmm.
So I got an invitation to a reunion, a meeting that was being held to plan our family reunion. And then I saw that he was listed as one of the heads.
Mm-hmm.
So I clicked on it. Yes, I was going, because I wanted to let everyone in the family know who they had planning our reunion and why he should not. My mom, she saw it because she got an invitation too. And she asked me, "Are you going?" And I told her, "Yes, ma'am." And she asked, "You know who's going to be there, don't you?" And I said, "Yes, ma'am." And she, she, she told me, "I'll be right there by your side." He didn't show up, but I did tell everyone else at the family, because I had written my essay already that details my abuse, but it didn't name him.
Mm-hmm.
But I told them he was the one. So they postponed the reunion.
Mm-hmm.
I did finally, when I'd gone to my great aunt's funeral, and at the graveside, I didn't go to it because it was far off the road. I was just waiting. He was there. And as he was coming back up to his car, I called him over to me.
Mm-hmm.
I said I needed to talk to him. And I had thoroughly planned on unleashing all of that hurt, all of that anger.
We have a couple more questions and we're getting close to the end of the hour.
Okay, but my mother,
Okay.
when I confronted him, she said that she had been watching and she was ready to come over in case I needed her, but she saw that I didn't.
Okay. So Asia in Utah wants to know, what has your journey between courage and fear been like?
Once I found the courage, it has been an incredible release that I've been able to feel. There is no more fear.
Mm-hmm.
I got that courage from another classmate of mine who disclosed on Facebook several years ago that he had been sexually abused as a child. Seeds that were planted there, I'll never forget, and I try and plant those seeds in others.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for answering that. Alice has a question for you. Alice in Houma, Louisiana. Has your abuse that you confronted ever been confronted by anyone else? I don't know that I understand that question. Do you?
Yeah.
You do?
Mm-hmm. I think that she's asking, has anyone else confronted him?
Mm.
Not to my knowledge.
Not to your knowledge. Well, Sedrick, we're at the top of the hour now. Thank you first off. Sedrick's at my home. And he come to spend the weekend with me, and we're doing some advocacy work, we're doing some playing around, we're doing some all kinds of stuff, getting to know each other a little bit more. Um, and I know it's a lot. It takes a lot of courage to tell your story, especially publicly like this. And so I wanted to thank you so much for taking the time and coming on the show.
Going back to the lady's question about courage and fear, there is no fear now in telling my story. And I hope that whoever this reaches, to let you know that you're not alone. People say there's nothing special about them. There's something special about each and every one of them. What you may be facing in your life, it can feel heavy. It can feel endless. It can feel so dark. But trust me, there is light, not just at the end of the tunnel, but there's light within you. I strive to help everyone to find their light.
Nice public service announcement. And I'll follow it up by saying that, you watched Sedrick tell his story, and hopefully it inspires somebody else to come forward, and so that they don't live a life of suffering like we have. And thanks for tuning in. It's the first time we've ever done it in a living room. So we're experimenting as we go along to see what works and what doesn't. And Sedrick, just one more time, thank you.
Thank you, brother. Thank you, not just for what you've done for me, but for so many other people. When you show up as your authentic self, you help people find their courage.
Thank you. I appreciate that. You do too.
And you know what?
What?
I loved Dallas growing up as a kid. I always wanted to get to Southport, but I made it to Richard Spoon.
All right, buddy. I love you, man. And so we're going to have interviews coming up. Some guests that we have scheduled is Mitch Garabedian, Tom Doyle. So some really heavy hitters in the industry. And thanks for watching. It's Saturday. You could have been doing anything else, but you watched us. And that means the world to us. So thank you, and we'll see you soon.
Bye-bye.